Hi, my name's Dave Whitefield. I'm a culture and engagement specialist focusing on safety and risk. In this video, I'm going to follow on from the last one where I talked about the idea of language and its impacts it has on the way we think about things within an organisation and some of the behaviours that happens. The last one we spoke about was safety and compliance. In this one, I'm particularly going to focus on safety, and I'm going to be sharing with you an example of an early conversation or an activity I do usually with senior leaders and managers. The idea of this is to surface the nature of safety. Now that sounds like maybe really broad and maybe really simple at the same time, right? I mean, safety is obvious what it means, but it turns out it means different things to different people, and particularly it means different things within organisations, and how it's talked about and how the meaning it's given an organisation can sometimes have some undesirable results, and that's what this surfaces. And then hopefully you'll see I'm going to leave some space where organisations need to embrace a more comprehensive concept of what safety means and resist simple catchphrases and simple definitions. So it starts with a question, as a lot of this stuff does. The idea is I'm trying to surface the idea of what safety means and the concepts behind it. So the question I ask is I get people to finish this sentence. I've also learned I can't write and talk at the same time here. So the question is, to me, safety is about. And I get people to do this as an individual activity. They might be writing it on post-it notes or on a bit of paper, or just thinking about it for a small group, and then we'd extract that out and put it on a whiteboard or something. Post-it notes work really well because you can stick them all up. And what this is getting out of them is this idea, it's a concept or a feeling of, well, to me, safety is about, okay? And it surfaces the actual language of safety in the business. So it might not surprise you, but here's some of the themes I get, right? One of the really strong themes I get is that safety is about something to do with going home, which is fascinating from, again, a workplace point of view, that we're anchoring safety to something not at work. Just sit with that for a little bit and contemplate that. But this comes from all this language of it's the moments that matter, and safety is about going home to your family and going home at the end of the day, right? So that's a really common one. Another one is a really common linkage around harm and injury. So no harm, zero harm, incident-free, injury-free, whatever it is. Sometimes illness gets in there, but I will say the majority of the time it's just harm and injury, which relates more to physical stuff than disease and illness. That's probably half of the responses that I get. It is influenced by the types of clients I'm with. So when we do a lot of work in, say, engineering, oil and gas, sort of that heavy industry stuff, that you tend to get a bit more of a bias that way. Now, there are some other results, of course. Sometimes we get something at the other end of the spectrum where people say safety is about people, a bit radical, or safety is about caring, or safety is about communication, or something like that. So a little bit different sort of perspective there. Another one, I never get compliance, by the way, so again, in reference to the last video, that's always a fascinating outcome. Another one that does come up sometimes is that safety is something to do with risk, and I'm going to come back and talk about that one, because I think actually risk is where organisations need to move towards. So to preempt the end of this, I think the problem is we anchor too much to the language on that side and not enough to this side. The reason why it makes sense, of course, is this is measurable and that's not. So I get why, but the problem is our fixation with that side is leading us down a path that we didn't want. And here's the example of why. Could you have a day, a week, a month, 6 months, or a year where everyone went home safely, or you operated in a way where nobody was harmed or there was no injury, and yet you weren't safe? So could you have everyone go home yet you weren't safe? And of course the answer is yes. Of course you can, right? So this highlights the very nature of the problem, in that just because we went home doesn't mean we're safe. Now, isn't that interesting, right? That first of all, that was the answer that nearly half the people give me, yet intuitively they also go, well, maybe it's not what safety is. So what this activity does is actually surface the language of safety in the business. It's the way it's collectively talked about. It's not an absolute criteria, but over time you see the themes come out of it, right? So what we've got now is a situation where the organisation has kind of built this intuitive idea that safety is about harm or about going home, and it's been built by talking about it, by the language, by promotion, by brands, by signage, by everything, by what gets measured and talked about. But we've built this idea of safety, yet we just said that's not what safety means necessarily or on its own. So the idea of harm is fine. The problem is when we get fixated on that's what it means, and that activity shows it, right? So again, the idea of being about people, well, that's cool. And I'd say it shouldn't just be about this, but I think it should be about people. So an example of something we did with an organisation where they knew they had some issues around, say, fatigue and bullying and burnout, probably more the burnout and fatigue, I'll say, is we picked up on this and we actually planted this as part of the activity. We said, well, if we're in this bit here, should safety be about well-being? Right? As a question. And of course the answer is, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Safety should be about well-being. So the idea then is you start planting it and you would incorporate that. So the end result is to say it's risky if you just fixate on one thing. You may get results you don't want. Organisations need to adopt a more comprehensive concept of safety. I think it should be about risk, because that's the issue, right? Of everyone went home, but why wasn't it safe? Well, we took too much risk, or it didn't feel right, or something. Risk is the thing that we feel much more often, right? So then we say, well, if we also want safety to be about well-being, what happens then is over time, you've got this dissonance or tension created where we keep saying we want to be safe, and underneath that is this anchoring that safety is about managing risks, making sure people go home, looking after the well-being of our people. You know, you've anchored 3 to 5 concepts of what safety actually means instead of just leaving it to one. That's the difference I'm talking about here. And over time, you keep talking about safety as well-being, but then you're not looking after people's well-being. So that in itself creates a bit of a dissonance, and organisations will have to manage that tension, typically by stop talking about safety as well-being or starting to treat people better. That'll take 12 to 24 months though. This is not the sort of stuff where you suddenly go, bang, we've just fixed it. But this is how language, when it's properly integrated in a meaningful way within an organisation, can influence behaviours over time. So just a really quick insight there into how we can sort of get people to reflect on what safety means in the business, how we can get it to reflect on the fact that it might not be what actually safety means, how organisations need to adopt a more complex or comprehensive idea of safety. Safety is a wicked problem. That means it is fundamentally unsolvable, and it also means it's fundamentally unmeasurable, in my opinion. I know we can measure aspects of safety or elements of it, but again, this conversation highlights how easily we can get drawn in the trap of wanting to measure something and harm being the easiest thing to measure. And yet, one simple question, does zero harm mean that you are safe? And the answer is no. Shows that in fact, safety is not just about harm. It needs to be about something else. So I hope that's got some thought going. Welcome any conversation, any debate, stick it in the comments down below. And thanks for watching.